Welcome to Life by Design for Chiropractors, episode 94.
Welcome to Life by Design, the podcast for chiropractors. Here's your host, Dr. Jamie Richards.
Welcome to Life by Design for Chiropractors. I'm your host, Dr. Jamie Richards, and today I bring on my pal, Dr. Mike Gibson, and we're talking about the concept of ascension. Ascension as it applies to improving the profitability of your practice without necessarily seeing more visits. And I think that is a concept that gets missed by a lot of doctors. It's a concept that could make a massive change, not just in your lifestyle, but in your practice. So we walk through today, we talk about the pipeline, your core product, and a handful of other components that will be valuable in you applying this principle. Of course, as always, if you'd like to come on the show and talk about a problem you're having or an area you'd like to improve, work on, brainstorm, then by all means, send me an email. We'd love to bring you on the show and do a coaching call live on Life by Design for Chiropractors, jamie@lifebydesign.com. And if you're looking for an opportunity to work at the Life by Design Center, same thing. Fire me a message. Enjoy today's episode of Life by Design for Chiropractors, the voice of reason in chiropractic. Mike, welcome back to Life by Design for Chiropractors.
Thanks, Jamie. Great to be here.
Yeah, always great to have you on the show and always a great topic coming down the pipe. So I'm excited for this one. Today we're talking about a new concept, well, maybe new to some of our listeners, this idea of ascension and, how to take customers that are part of your practice or part of your enterprise, if you will, and move them up essentially the buying chain. And we'll talk today about who's best to do that with, how we're going to do that. We'll give you specific and exact examples of how we do it in our practices. And yet one of the underlying, I think, places to start, Mike, before we even talk about core product and ascension and the actual buyer's journey is just this idea of profitability. And I know it's something you're obviously passionate about. It's something I think actually you taught me more about this than anybody. And as weird as it is, and I think I was probably in the same boat as lots of people listening in, it sounds crazy to say this, but profitability was not the top metric on my list of practice success.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things come to mind when you say that. First of all, yes. I think, when I was pretty early on in practice, like all of us, we go to these workshops, we listen to someone speaking on stage, and essentially all the talk was ever about was the number of people that you saw. But yet, I've always been a student of business, always read, copious books about business and how to be more profitable. And I always thought it funny that in any other industry that I read about, the actual number of sales, I'll use that term, wasn't something that was talked about a whole lot. Really, at the end of the day, all they talked about was the company profitable? What were the margins maybe? But, that's what the discussion was all about. And it was always a drive and creating strategy to make and create the most profitable business imaginable. And so that kind of disconnect really, struck me for a while, and hence, a lot of the reasons that we teach the way we do, why we created the SSS. Many of the pieces of the SSS are probably very different than the typical chiropractic, stats package. For that very reason, it's based on profit, not necessarily volume. Although volume is an important stat, please don't hear me the wrong way, but at the end of the day, it's the profitability that really, really matters. And then the other piece of that puzzle for me was always the fact, and we've talked about this before on the podcast, where I early on, through locums that I would do, realized that I didn't want that massive practice. I didn't enjoy it. And, you always laugh at me, but my famous 213, my goal of 113 people. That was the volume that I wanted to see in practice. That's what I enjoyed. That's what I, was energized by and looked forward to doing. And more than that, I lost the passion and enjoyment, and it just wasn't what I wanted. And so the goal was still, how do I create a very profitable business, but yet only see my 213 people? How do I create a practice that, is as profitable as, say, a 1,000 visit a week practice, but only see 213 myself. And that's where the idea of Ascension, first came to my mind. And I tried to figure out that puzzle.
Yeah, it's funny that we're talking about 213, like really actually funny. I almost texted you yesterday. I know we were texting back and forth about a couple other things, and I almost texted you, we've come full circle. 213 is my number now as well, because we've made a lot of changes in our practice and we've compressed. So now I practice only 2 days. And essentially, that's the target number that I'm shooting for over those 2 days is, 200 to 210 or 15 visits in those 2 days. And it's probably a little higher volume than I probably would love. But from a profitability standpoint, that's what drives our center and drives all the other projects. So I just thought, how hilarious is it that, my goal is 213.
I love it. Something about that number. It was magic.
That's the magic number that we're going to let everybody know. You got to hit 213. But of course, you have to have all the other levers in place. And this is, what you were alluding to is, obviously you have to have a certain number of visits, but those visits can yield the highest essentially return possible. And that's based on things like how much value can you deliver, what are you offering? There's just so many layers to this. So some of the real quick basic fundamentals of profitability, because we're going to talk more about Ascension today, but I think we've got to get these ones right. One of the first levers that you can change is simply your per visit collection. And I know we already said we're probably going to break this out into a bigger podcast, but Mike, this is, I think, one of the areas when we look at the success surveillance system. Again, I'm guilty of this myself back in the day. It's amazing how low the collections are on per visit basis.
Yeah, and that was something I remember actually sitting in your living room out at the lake there, and we were going over. I remember we had all these different stats programs that we got from different places, and we were looking at them all, and we were getting feedback from other docs and putting all this all together. And it was there was a whole long list of things that were really shocking to us. But one of them I recall being, it was alarming to see how low, the average collection was per visit. And it was far below, so I would say, here's my baseline. Here's my standard for this. I think that if your pay per visit fee is, say, $50. So if I was to walk in off the street and pay for one visit, it would be $50. I've always thought that your collection per visit on average should be 50 or more. And so there's a couple moving pieces to that. Is that one, if you're going to offer some type of a discount off the fee in order to pay in advance or pay monthly or whatever type of program you've got set up, you should be able to, maybe I'll throw the word ascend the clients in there, where they're obviously paying for exams, but also paying for some other products, services that are supportive, which we'll get back to, of your core product, so that you can bring that number back over that $50 mark. And so I remember us sitting in your living room and looking and saying, wow, it is shocking to see how much lower, like $5, $10, $15 lower than actually their collections, their actual fee per visit was startling to me. Not to mention that also in that same vein, we look at their CPP, their cost to deliver an adjustment, and in many cases the margin was nothing, or in some cases I remember people are paying to adjust people. It's crazy.
That's exactly what it was. And I mean, we have worked with lots of clients who started out in that place, and it's obviously when they go through their success surveillance system, I will say there has been some shocked conversations for people in a good way, in a sense that obviously reality exists and you can't keep telling yourself that it doesn't. And so, when that punches you in the face that you're actually paying people to come into your practice, it changes your whole mindset in terms of how you approach getting your fees up to par, changing pricing and so on. And really the point about profitability in that fee is that it's a bigger lever than the number of visits. And I think that's one of the things that I had to do, was really actually crunch the numbers. And so we're kind of getting down into this other podcast, but the point is we'll cover this stuff in the future. Understand that your per visit fee is one of those areas. Another area is just auditing your expenses. whether it be looking at how much you're spending. And I'm all about investing. Absolutely. I'm not cheap in my practice in any way whatsoever. I invest in the experience. And so I'm happy to spend money, but I'm not really excited about wasting money.
No. Yeah. And actually, that's one of the things that, for whatever reason, I've been doing a lot with clients lately is just, getting their accountant to send over the expense list and really just going through it with people. And listen, it's pretty easy for most practices to save $500,000 a month on just little bits and pieces here that just kind of add up over time. But over, over a period of a year, even that it really does start to add up.
Right.
And so just being really hyper aware of exactly where your money's going. And like you said, there's a difference between wasting money and investing back in your business. I'm not suggesting that you cut out, every possible expense you can. That's not the objective here. It's just not to be wasteful.
Right, exactly. And so the third piece of the profitability before we talk about Ascension, Mike, and I think you can highlight this, it's something that, you've built into one of the tracking systems that we use in the Elite Doctor program in terms of, knowing what your return on investment is. And of course, lots of people have talked about this. What I love about, the way you've set it up is that return on investment is not just, the amount of money that you're taking in. It's really about including the amount of time and energy and the opportunity costs. And so when we talk about Ascension and we talk about, well, you could do this, or you could sell a product, or you could run a course, or there's a million things you can do to ascend a customer. But I think the precursor here is you have to decide whether it's actually worth your time and effort.
Yeah. And I think, I liken it to, well, it's an investment. I mean, anytime that you are considering, offering a new product or a new service, essentially it's an investment, right? You're going to have to invest money and, like you said, time in order to make that happen. And so, just like any other investment, if you were to buy a whole life insurance policy or buy a mutual fund or whatever it is that you invest your money in, I think it's really important to have a checklist of sorts for you to just really evaluate, is this a good idea? And there can be all sorts of criteria. One of course, is this going to make money? Is this not just going to produce revenue, but when you account for the expenses, both of which are, time, money, resources, is this going to produce enough of a profit for it to be worthwhile? And so I think that's something that we oftentimes overlook, and we don't necessarily even just some simple math to calculate, okay, maybe not in the beginning when I'm getting things going, but once we've got things going, and if we can project a volume of sales at X, what type of return can we expect on this? And doing some forecasting like that, I think we oftentimes get, especially with the, there's been, especially in chiropractor, it seems to be the, the new shiny penny every quarter, whether it's, exogenous ketones or essential oils or what have you. We tend to just go, oh, I mean, there seems to be a real need in the market right now. Let's just jump on this without much forethought or planning as to what is this going to look like, in 6 months from now, and also really how profitable is this going to be.
Right.
And again, like you said, really important to not only take into account the financial, but also the time and other resources that may not be shown on a balance sheet.
Right. What's mind-blowing to me is, the number of chiropractors who don't realize how profitable chiropractic is. That's the part that blows my mind. When you crunch these numbers and you say, okay, I could practice for 10 hours a week, and the number of patients I could see in that practice time, and as long as my pricing's set well and we've got an efficient practice, I mean, you're talking about in a year, hundreds of thousands of dollars for working, 15 hours a week. It's mind blowing that somebody wants to spend 15 hours a week, trying to sell a bunch of stuff online or start in an MLM. And again, not saying you shouldn't do those things, but a lot of times they're doing them, instead of what they really should be doing, which is growing and building their practice. And if you don't want to do that, then maybe you shouldn't be in practice. That's a whole other conversation. So let's talk about the pipeline, Mike, and that's going to lead us to the core product and how we ascend people. So just give you some context here. Basically, it's really simple. And I like the way that we look at this. And I think it gives you a visual. On the front end, you have our marketing. So essentially lead generation. lead nurturing, which is I think a great conversation to have in the future. A lot of people are focused on getting leads and then they don't start. You've talked about the 90-10 principle, but there's this whole lead nurturing process, converting. So your sales process, retaining, and then at the end, ascending. And this is where a lot of doctors miss out is they get someone to start care. They maybe even retain them in an ongoing way where somebody's coming consistently, but then they miss out on a huge opportunity of ascension. And that's where we're going to try and build out your practice today, is give you some of those steps that you can implement and actually increase your profitability. The big important point is all of this ties around your core product. So Mike, talk about the core product, and then from there we'll talk about how to ascend.
Yeah, and I think this is, I'm glad you brought this up next, because I just said, make sure that you're getting a significant return on your investment, and you have to consider the intangibles, for example, like time. Well, there's a flip side of this, right? Is that, the value in selling other products or services is not only calculated in money as well. Mm-hmm. For example, let's just take the essential supplements. So in the Life by Design program and Eat by Design, we have our essential supplements, and essentially we sell those, of course, as part of their ancillary recommendations. We're selling those to every practice member that comes in. So yeah, it does create another source of revenue. It's not time consuming to do so. It doesn't take a lot of time to just keep product in stock. Of course, the only other thing there it does tie up some cash flow, but it's nothing significant. But what does it also do? It increases retention, right? It helps people get better results, which essentially allows for better retention, because when you get getting better results, of course, people stick around longer. And of course, that can lead into referrals and on and on and on. So there's other wins and there's other benefits to having other products and services. And, that would probably be the best example that I can give you. A foam roller would be another good example, right? If you have that, or even a mobility program that you're either offering as part of care, or maybe there's an upsell to a mobility program. Or of course, Jamie and I have the gyms, right? And as we were joking before we got started here, we're absolutely not stressing you open a gym, but those are all upsells that also are going to support our core product. So yes, they're profitable, but listen, if you're going to spend the same amount of time that you do in actually selling a supplement, if you put that into that same amount of time into getting maybe even one more new person, your margin is much higher. However, it can have a bigger impact in a bigger picture with more of your practice members and increased retention across the board because of supporting, getting better results, referrals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not just the money isn't the bottom line. I didn't want to give that impression. Right. There are many things to consider, but I think that the big take-home point here is that, you should always be able to check the box that says that this product or service, right, this ascension is has a direct positive influence on our core product.
Yes, exactly. And it matches our values, and it's part of meeting, in our case, the requirements, the physiological needs of the body to help them get those results you talked about. And I think one of the big benefits of ascension, and probably more so than ever before in our practice, it's become very evident, is that when you actually start to hit capacity issues, right? So if you're simply building your practice based on visit volume, and even if you have your pricing set and all that's wonderful, eventually you could hit capacity issues. So maybe you don't have another doctor or associates, or maybe you have associates, but then you hit a new capacity issue. You just don't have enough space. And of course, there's solutions for that. You get a new location, you have more room, whatever it is. But let's say in my case, difficult finding an associate doctor, right? So we're still in the recruiting process, pretty much at capacity for the days I'm willing to work. What's the only other thing I can do? Well, I can increase my fees, which we just did. We can increase the fees of the examinations, which we just did. Next, I can start selling more supplements or other ways to ascend people into other areas of my core product. So, Mike, why don't we talk about some specific examples of ways to ascend people and take this concept and we'll make it real. So focus on supplements. Share with us a little bit about how you've been able to ascend people and get a fairly high portion of your practice members actually using the essentials.
Yeah, I think when it comes to supplements, less is more, especially as it relates, like you've got a practice like ours that is so heavily built around this idea that of requirements and strategies. And so essentially what we suggest is that all of the supplements that we carry are essential. And so we don't have a pharmacy. And again, not saying that's a bad thing. Depends on your philosophy and your brand of your practice. But for us, we most important to us is just to keep, through and through every part of their experience, this idea of requirements and strategies. And it's good for everyone, good for everyone, good for a lifetime kind of idea, right? So the products and supplements specifically that we sell, it's not something where our staff has to kind of like wonder, well, do they need this or not? Every product that we sell in our practice is good for everyone, and everyone in our practice should be purchasing all of the supplements that we carry. And I found the focus on the few versus the complexity that comes with having a whole pharmacy has really increased our sales actually, which seems a little bit counterintuitive. And it's because we have more people buying everything that we have versus some people buying a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and we're not really sure. And it also allows us to create some really solid systems that we can apply to everyone. So everyone at visit 12 should be sold on a lacrosse ball and a mobility package, a lacrosse ball and a foam roll, because they were just given exercises that they're going to need those to do. At visit 24, they're going to need the essential supplements. Everybody, not some people that come out of that report, but every person that collects out of that report, my staff knows, hey, I need to ask them if they need some of the supplements, right? So there's that cohesiveness between the recommendations, what I'm telling them, and then my staff, and it's systematized on very specific visits, and my staff never has to guess. They know that everything that we carry, everybody needs it, and everybody should be purchasing it.
Right. One of the systems that we implemented, and there's so many little components in here that we don't have time to get into: auditing systems, checking in at all the progress examinations, the annuals, the checklists that we use. So there's ways for us to spark these conversations. But one of the things that's been really helpful for us is actually giving them an offer at the time when we introduce them. And so we started introducing our starter pack of essentials, and we have a coupon that goes with it, and it sits at the front desk, and I give it out when I talk about it. And it's just a way for them to then take the information, know that they're supposed to do it, and then they've got this coupon. So when they do go up, they can buy their whole starter pack together at once. We want to get them in that rhythm of fulfilling that requirement here in our office, so they start the buying process right away.
Yeah, I mean, and anytime, we give example upon example, but anytime that you can create systems and make things easy for people, I think that's where you're going to hit the home run, right? Especially with supplements. I mean, the reality is they could go down the street and probably buy the same thing.
Totally.
But it's the convenience of you having it right there for them, right? You're doing them a favor. They don't have to drive down the road and go, shit, they've got 25 different options here for me. I don't really know which one. Listen, this is the best one. It's right here. Here you go. It's that convenience, and when it's built into the process, that's when it actually creates even more value for people, because it takes away all the uncertainty.
For sure. I mean, they go, and for you as a healthcare provider, if you send them down to a location, sure, you might have an affiliation with this person, because we've done this in the past, but it gets confusing. And I've had, situations where then they're getting sold on 5 other things that I didn't advise. And of course, I don't want to make the business owner sound like, they were a bad person for trying to sell these other things. And so I think just keeping as much in-house as just a general kind of rule, as much in-house, or at least under your control, as assuming it has to do with your core product. There's other things, whether we're sending to a massage therapist or, other providers, but anything that's part of my core product, I really like to retain the control over. So Mike, beyond supplements, let's brainstorm a few things for our listeners. What other things could they ascend people to that would fall within a potential core product that would be profitable and worth the time and energy?
I was going to jokingly say the gym, but then you said worth the time. We're joking, by the way. The gym,
Don't do it.
The gym is great, and
I'm joking.
I wouldn't have it any other way. I love having the gym.
Absolutely.
So many benefits, but it's a lot. But some of the other things. So the gym is a big one for us, of course, and it works in both directions, right? It's a tremendous new patient generator. And when I say that, I don't feel like I need to add the caveat, not because they're getting hurt, it's
Right.
because we install an assessment at the start for everybody, and they realize that, hey, they're a little bit broken and they could perform a lot better and train in a much more safe way
Yeah.
if they were actually if their spine nerve system was healthier. But that's a big one for us. Another one that we have, of course, is the workshops. And I use this one because we have these on a monthly basis. And listen, the tickets are for a non-member $20. So listen, we're not making any money off significant money off the workshops by any. Not suggesting that, but of course, what they also do is they allow an opportunity for people to bring guests and actually generate. It's more of a marketing activity. But I think definitely with technology the way it is, especially I find in bigger markets like mine versus yours, Jamie, where you can start to create some of these courses versus having live events, but starting to record them, housing them online, so that people can actually purchase these courses, in an online format, and actually start to, because as soon as you do that, it doesn't have to just be the people in your community. You can expand that all, worldwide if you wanted to. And so there's lots of new opportunities, I think, where that you can leverage technology to share material and content you're already creating, or maybe you want to expand and grow into some other areas, but you can start to leverage that, put that online, and actually start to sell that to other people. And the beautiful thing is, for a lot of us, we've got so much content, we put together so much great stuff. It's just using that, packaging it in a different way, and reaching out to more people.
Yeah, I'm actually glad you talked about that. That was the one for me that I see as a huge untapped area in chiropractic specifically, since we're talking about chiropractic, with our knowledge base about health, about physiology in so many different areas, spine and nervous system and beyond, combined with the digital access and the ability to, run Facebook ads or YouTube ads or, some other form of lead generation. I think you could make an amazing amount of sales if you obviously started to learn and know what you're doing. But you could take these courses or these videos you create, turn them into courses. And yeah, you might start with selling them to your practice. I think a lot of docs just think they need to give everything away. And I was of the same ilk, and I give so much stuff away in my practice on a regular basis. But I think that you could easily turn this into a course. And by turning it into a course or some type of program that's downloadable, or you can log into it, there's lots of different options here, I think you're going to naturally be more okay with selling it. So for me, the fact that I don't have, let's say, a spinal rehabilitation course, we have our Move by Design course. I've got videos, they're on the website. We give them away to the people who come to the workshops. It's natural for me to just go, well, here, I'll send you the link, or the staff will send you the link. But I know if I had a example, bulletproof your lower back course that was built, or, whether it be a productivity course that was built, it would be pretty easy for me then just to send the link to the course, and there'd be a fee associated with it. And I'd be just as much happy to go ahead and take the revenue as well. So I think it's really an untapped area. It's also going to be a lead generator. So some of those people are going to be in your local area. Some are going to be practice members, some are not. And yes, Mike already explained, you could expand this globally and make sales worldwide and internationally. I think there's, again, I keep saying this, there's a huge untapped potential here, but locally there's a potential to generate leads. We hear from docs all the time, I've got to find more new people. How do you do your online? I mean, a course would be a great way to either generate or nurture leads in your community.
Yeah. And I think, when you were speaking about that, the one thing that popped up in my brain is this idea that I think is still, if it's not, it was for many, many years, but it got very, very common for people to write books, right? Mm-hmm. And the whole idea there was that with, again, technology, you could write and self-publish a book, but the idea was that it created a level of authority. Mm-hmm. And so if you start to create these courses as well, I'm not sure if it's as significant, the authority created is not as significant as writing a book per se, but I do think that there is a level of authority that gets created if people in your community are seeing that you have created all these courses about different topics. But I do want to add this, I couldn't help but, as I was listening to share that, Jamie, I couldn't help but also think back to, just kind of to circle back a little bit to comments I made earlier about understanding, and really doing your homework about this investment before you get, you get deep into it and you start down that path. Because listen, as I was listening to you talk, Jamie, and you were talking about creating an online course, that takes a significant, doesn't take necessarily a lot of money these days, but for example, in this example, that takes a lot of knowledge from a technological perspective, right?
Right.
It's getting easier and easier and easier, but I know a lot of people, if I would say, okay, listen, you go put a course together, Jamie, you and I could probably do it, very, very quickly, and it would be absolutely 100% worth our time. But we've done it over and over and over for different businesses, right? But I don't want, I want to make sure, here's what I want to do. I want to make sure that some people listening, don't underestimate the amount of knowledge and skill is required to do so. And the big point of starting off with some of the comments we had in the beginning about doing your homework first and really understanding the pros and cons to any of these ascension ideas, make sure that you don't just say, oh, well, wow, look at the amount of money. If I sold 50 of these courses at this price, I'm going to make a fortune. Well, that's true, but it may take you, a year and, $5,000 in other courses that you need to take to figure out how to actually build it. So love the idea. Couldn't be more behind the idea, but make sure that you don't skip that first step that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. It is, obviously I get super pumped about creating ideas, as you already know, get to heading down the path myself. And you're right, as much as we've even created these courses over and over again, to be totally honest, and you know this because of the challenges that we face creating some of our courses, even then it still takes an amazing amount of time and energy to create these courses and to prepare them. So great idea. I think it's probably ideal to start with things like supplements, figuring out your core product, making sure those things tie together, get those introduced to your people. Those steps are much easier. They're all in-house, mostly one-to-one type selling, maybe some email selling through your existing database of active practice members, tickets to seminars, workshops, even small things like swag or books. There's lots of ways to add a few, extra pieces here and there that keep supporting that core product. And then down the road, if you decide that, hey, I'd like to build a small course and try that, do your research, make sure it's worth the time and the energy, or get help and do that and make sure it's worth the time and energy. So I think the take home today, guys, is really this whole conversation about profitability in your practice and starting to look at the levers that move profitability and start to consider all of these different aspects, whether it be your core product, ascension, the pipeline we talked about, capacity issues. So there's a lot of stuff. I feel like this is a podcast, Mike, they might have to listen to more than once.
Yeah, I absolutely think so. And I think too, hopefully what we've done today is, planted the seed of ascension first of all. We've given you a series of ideas, really based on our core product. Jamie and I's core product is very similar, but for a lot of you docs listening, some of you have some diverse practices that are a little bit different, and your core, you may create a list of potential ascension ideas that are very much different than ours based on that. So I think, we've tried to start the conversation, but I hope that everyone listening will keep their practice in mind, their business in mind, their core product in mind, and really do some brainstorming beyond the examples that we gave to say, okay, what makes sense for my business and my core products? I think that list, although we gave some great examples, that list could, really grow for different practices depending on what you're doing.
Yeah, I think you're right. Well said, Mike. So guys, go to the show notes at lifebydesignforchiropractors.com/podcast. Find today's episode. You'll see everything in there. And as always, thank you for listening to Life by Design for Chiropractors, the voice of reason in chiropractic.